Hey everybody, what is going on? Hexlex here with another Master Duel video for you, one I am extremely excited about because I am extremely excited about this deck right here. This is my Tenyi Swordsoul deck, or at the very least my first iteration of it. In fact, you know what? I actually literally thought of this just now this second. I'm even going to name this Tenyi Swordsoul 1.0 because I do plan on periodically updating this build from time to time, and this is far from what I would call the... You know what, this isn't even the first iteration of it, if I'm being totally honest, because if you check out my Twitter, link in the description, I did actually post a very slightly different version of this build. So this is more like the 1.1 build, but it's only a 2-card difference from what I was initially testing. In any case, yeah, this is my build for Tenyi Swordsoul, again, for the time being. I built this list by looking at a whole bunch of different lists taken from like the TCG, the OCG, seeing some like speculation lists that people were working on. Of course, I did my own fair bit of speculation testing, preparing these past few days, and a little bit beforehand, but not too much. Like in this like past month, I started glancing at the deck, you know, but I didn't really start getting into it until pretty much the deck was announced. So I definitely still consider myself like, not a novice per se. I mean, I've been practicing, but I'm not an expert quite yet. However, I do feel very comfortable playing this deck because not only is this deck very good, it's actually not very difficult at all to pick up. I do plan on making a combo guide to accompany this video. Should be coming out very shortly after this one, so look forward to that. But the lines are fairly simple, and they're pretty intuitive too. There are some times, depending on the game state, where you have to get a little bit creative, but honestly, for the most part, I mean, the deck doesn't play itself. I wasn't gonna say that. I wanted to say that for a second, but it's not quite like that. But you know, it's not like other synchro decks we have to combo because our monsters, our Swordsoul monsters, actually make their own tuners. So we don't have to memorize quite as much, you know, as many lines of play as we do for synchro decks. Or rather, we don't have to memorize as extensive of lines. So as always, I'm going to go through the list card by card, and then we're going to go ahead and talk about the individual card choices and what they do for the deck. And of course, as always as well, I have some replays to show you along with that. Now, don't worry, there is live gameplay along the way as well. I do plan on getting that up again in the very near future. So it's actually going to be a really busy recording week because we've got all this new stuff and the Fusion event coming up in a couple of days. So, well, actually, I think, you know, that I'm thinking about it. By the time this video comes out, I think it might be the first day of the Fusion Fest. We'll figure it out. In any case here, like I said, let's go through the list card by card. We'll talk about the deck, the cards, and then we'll see some games. So, we've got 3 Tenyi Spirit, Adhara, 3 Maxx, 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, 2 Ghost Belle and Haunted Mansion, 3 Swordsoul of Mo Ye, 2 Swordsoul of Taia. I think this is Taia. It might be Taia, but I've heard Taia. I don't know. We have 2 incredible Ecclesia, the Virtuous, 3 Swordsoul Strategist, Longyuan, 2 Tenyi Spirit, Vishuda, 3 Tenyi Spirit, Ashuna, 1 Nibiru, the Primal Being, 2 Vessel for the Dragon Cycle, 3 Swordsoul Emergence, 1 Swordsoul Sacred Summit, 2 Called by the Grave, 2 Crossout Designator, 2 Infinite Impermanence, and then finally a Swordsoul Blackout. Now down here in the extra deck, we've got Yazi, Evil of the Yang Zing, Crimson Blader, 2 Baxia, Brightness of the Yang Zing, 1 Cyframe Lord Omega, 1 Draco Berserker of the Tenyi, 1 Adamantipator Risen Dragite, 2 Swordsoul Grandmaster Chizao, 1 Chao Fang, Phantom of the Yang Zing, 1 Baron de Fleur, 1 Swordsoul Supreme Sovereign Chang Ying, 2 Monk of the Tenyi, and then finally 1 Shaman of the Tenyi. So, how does this deck work? Well, of course, it is based mostly on these Swordsoul cards. Mo Ye is going to be one of your more ideal and common starters. What is one more special summon? You reveal a Swordsoul or a Worm, and then you summon the aforementioned, like I talked about earlier in the video, a Swordsoul token that is a tuner token, which I don't think we've actually seen in the game at all before this point. So, and of course, all these Swordsouls also carry the effect that while that token is on the board, neither player can synchro summon, or players. What? Neither player, Jesus. You can only synchro summon from the extra deck. So you can't go into links or anything else while the token is out. And then if Mo Ye is sent to the graveyard as a synchro material, you get to draw a card, which is actually really, really nice. Easy way to get advantage, and chain blocks the main synchro you go into with Mo Ye, which is Chi Zhao. Chi Zhao, another cornerstone, actually the cornerstone of the deck. When this card is synchro summoned, you can add or banish, but most often add a Swordsoul card from your deck. Then, as a quick effect, you can banish any Swordsoul card or Worm card from your hand or graveyard, and negate the effects of a face-up effects monster on the field. So it's a combo, extender, and disruption in one neatly packaged synchro monster. Now for the other Swordsoul cards in the main deck, we've got Swordsoul of Taia. This is a 2 of because it's not really, it's kind of like the Karos, quote-unquote, of this deck, right? Where it's a good extender, but it's not a good opener. Sorry about that, just had to take a sip of water there. So this one also summons the Swordsoul token by banishing a Swordsoul card or Worm monster from your graveyard. And then when it's sent to the graveyard as a synchro material, you can basically foolish a Swordsoul or Worm card. So that's pretty nice. Longyuan is going to be another one of our main Swordsoul monsters in the main deck here. This one gets its token by you discard a Swordsoul card or other Worm monster, and then you can summon both it and the Longyuan. So that's pretty nice. And then this card has a kind of a random effect. When you use it as synchro material, you deal 1200 burn damage, which I don't know. Usually it's like 800 or 1000, but okay, 1200. And yeah, so then you get to go into level 10s. This is how you go into level 10s, is with Longyuan here plus the token. For the Tenyi cards, we've got 3 Adhara, level 1 tuner. All the Tenyi cards can special themselves if you control no effect monsters, and then they have another effect if you control specifically a non-effect monster by banishing them from the hand or graveyard. So, yep, Adhara can return one of your banished Worm monsters to your hand. Very nice for wheeling Ashuna, which can summon a Tenyi monster from the deck as its banish effect. Note that if you use this effect, though, you can only special summon Worm monsters for the rest of the turn. So you can't go into, like, Dragite or Baron or Cyframe Lord or Crimson Blader, are pretty much the only extract monsters you can't go into. But important to note that if you do use Ashuna on turn 1, you won't be able to go into Baron on turn 1, which ideally you normally do want to go into Baron on turn 1, but sometimes you'll only really have plays by using the Ashuna, so in that case, you can go into the Changying instead, and that'll be fine, but again, Baron is the optimal level 10 choice going first, and honestly, mostly in general, too. And then we're also playing 2 Vishuda. This one is kind of like not really a combo extender like Ashuna and Adhara are, but this one is good disruption because its banish effect is that you can target a card the opponent controls and return it to the hand. Very useful for getting rid of floodgates like Skill Drain, or potentially something like, I don't know, well, I guess it wouldn't really work with Necro Valley, but it can work on monsters too. So if your opponent has like a monster floodgate, you can go ahead and bounce that as well. So yeah, and then of course for the Swordsoul engine, I almost forgot, incredible Ecclesia, the Virtuous, which I actually really like this card name. But yeah, this card is pretty interesting. So it can special itself if your opponent controls more monsters than you can do. So it tends to be better going second. But it's actually got a quick effect like Lone Fire effects to special summon Swordsoul monsters from your deck. Now, one important thing to note about Ecclesia is that she's not a Swordsoul card herself, and she's not a Worm. So in a lot of ways, she doesn't really synergize with the rest of the deck, which is why I've got 2 copies. Instead of 3 here. I've seen people run anywhere from 0 to 3. I was actually initially only testing 1 copy, but the card is a little bit better than I gave it credit for, so I bumped up to a 2nd copy here in the deck. But obviously the ability to pull most likely Mo Ye out of the deck is still really, really good, especially as a quick effect, because if your opponent tries to like, well, that was weird. I wonder if that was my headphones or the actual game. The music cut out for a second. I wonder if that happened in the video. But anyway, yeah, so this card is pretty good for, just like I said, going into the Mo Ye. And it can also dodge certain hand traps by using the effect as a quick effect. So that's pretty nice. But it is still a little susceptible to hand traps, which is another reason why I've got 2 and not 3 copies in here. As for the other Swordsoul and Tenyi cards, you got 3 Swordsoul Emergence, this being the Rhoda for the deck. It can also add any Worm card if you control a synchro monster. So most often you're going to search the Emergence with Chi Zhao, and that is important to, like, more often than not you'll get a Swordsoul card, but it is important to note that you can potentially search a Tenyi monster as well. if you need one. So definitely keep that in mind. I do kind of forget this sometimes. It is definitely something you should keep in mind. We also got 2 Vessel for the Dragon Cycle. I initially had 3, but I went down to 2 because, like, this card is pretty good for the deck, but it's not always what you want to see. So this is foolish for any war monster, and then if you control a face-up non-effect monster, which is most often going to be either your Monk of the Tenyi or the token, but most often your Monk. But yeah, if you control that, then you can also add a Tenyi monster from your deck to your hand, as long as it's got a different name than the one you search. So you can send an Ashuna and then add an Adhara to set up a play that way. You can send a Vishuda if you need to bounce something. This can also double as disruption in that regard, because you can send the Vishuda there. And then for the, and then of course we also have the Swordsoul Sacred Summit. This is basically Monster Reborn for the deck, which is not useful too often, but there is actually like a little 3-card combo you can do. We actually talked about it in like the Swordsoul Basics video that went up yesterday, I believe, when this is posted. But yeah, this is useful for that combo in order to end on Chi Zhao plus Baron plus any level 8 or sometimes even 9 synchro monster you control. Or 7. You can end on any level 7, 8, or 9 actually. Final Swordsoul card is going to be Blackout. This is basically Icarus attack for the deck. It's not like the most important Swordsoul card in the deck. In fact, it's arguably the least of all of them, the least important. You really typically only want to search this with Chi Zhao if you've already got all the combo pieces you need in your hand. And this is a nice little extra bit of disruption to end on, but definitely not vital to the deck. Good, but not vital. And then finally, for the other cards, for hand traps and other generic staples, we're of course using 3 Maxi and 3 Ash. New to our hand trap repertoire here is Ghost Belle and Haunted Mansion. This card is pretty much Ash for the graveyard. It can negate an effect that adds a card from the graveyard to hand deck or extra deck, special summons a monster from the graveyard, or banishes a card from the graveyard. So the reason that this card is in this deck is actually twofold. Well, and that's actually one overall overlying reason, which is that expect to see more Ghost Belle and Haunted Mansions in this new meta, because of not only the Swordsoul cards having the ability to, well, some of them have the ability to banish, like the Taia, of course your Ashuna banishes, but also furthermore there's also a Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, which of course has the effect to bring itself back from the graveyard. So Ghost Belle and Haunted Mansion is both good text against this deck, as well as, and then of course like other banishing effects include like Chi Zhao, naturally. That's one of the big ones that'll get hit. I knew I was forgetting one that was really obvious, but anyway, yeah, so Ghost Belle and Haunted Mansion, expect to see more of this card. So I'm not only playing 2 copies in order to use against those decks, but I'm also playing 2 Crossout Designator. So I definitely want to be able to stop other people who are using the Ghost Bells against me. I'm of course also playing 2 Call by the Graves for extra hand trap protection, but Crossout Designator also just generally a good pick for this deck right now, because Swordsoul is still so new and so many people are using it that you're bound to run into lots of mirror matches. So being able to negate pretty much anything in the mirror match is really, really good. Of course, we're running a copy of Nibiru because I generally like 1 Nibiru in my decks, especially if you're playing Crossout Designator. You should definitely be playing a Nibiru in your deck. And then for our final kind of staples, I'm not missing anything, right? Nope, I don't think so. For our final staple, we're playing 2 Infinite Impermanence. I'm not using Droplet in this deck because this deck doesn't offer quite as many extra resources to use Droplet with, so that's why I am opting for the Infinite Impermanences instead. Now down here in the extra deck, like I touched on earlier, Chi Zhao is going to be the main star of this extra deck and this deck in general. Like I said, Chi Zhao is a combo extender and a negation all in one. And then of course our other main synchro that we go into most often, especially on turn 1, is Baron de Fleur. But then there's also Cheng Ying as well. Cheng Ying most notably does banish a card from each of your opponent's field and graveyard whenever a card is banished in general. So it's most of attritional and can be used during your opponent's turn as well, if you use it as a quick effect like with Chi Zhao here. Or if you make Cyframe Lord Omega, you can rip a card from your opponent's hand, and then Cheng Ying will banish one from field and grave, so you can actually do like a full Trishul effect during your opponent's turn, which is neat. Let's see here. Oh, of course, another main card for this extra deck is Baxia. The reason we're running 2 copies is because this card actually has multiple uses. The first effect, when it's synchro summoned, you can shuffle cards on the field back into the deck up to the number of attributes that you of the worm monsters that you use to summon this. So, and we have a huge variety of attributes in this deck. All the Sword Souls are different attributes. The Tenyis are all different attributes too. So it's really not hard to make this card and shuffle 2 of your opponent's cards back, which is really, really nice. The other effect is that you can target a card in your field, destroy it, and then special level 4 lower monster from your graveyard, which can actually be a really good combo extender. You can pop like a spare Monk of the Tenyi, and then most often what you'll do is you'll pop a spare Monk of the Tenyi, bring back an Adhara in your grave, and then you can sink the Adhara and the Baxia into Chao Feng. And sometimes you can even end on Chao Feng on turn 1. Chao Feng's main use, well, actually has a couple of uses. One, your opponent cannot activate the effects of monsters with the same original attributes of the Yang Zing monsters used for the synchro summon. So with Baxia, this card becomes a floodgate for light effects, which is actually really good in this meta. Well, we'll actually see how good it ends up being. So this was a little bit more relevant in the TCG and the OCG, where Drytron was still at full power when this deck came out, but Drytron actually got hit recently with Ben 10-1. Now, that doesn't mean the deck is awful now or unplayable. The deck is still more than fine, but combined with these new cards coming out and that relatively to the rest of the ban list severe nerf, I don't think we're going to be seeing a whole lot of Drytrons, honestly, in the near future. Plus, you know, everyone's burned out playing against Drytrons, you know, that first week of Season 5. I'm sure the people who are using Drytrons are, you know, fairly burned out on that deck as well, so this might actually be not the right time to play this, although I will say Chao Feng's still very useful in the mirror match, where we do have a large variety of attributes, but most notably, Chi Zhao is light, and preventing your opponent from being able to use either of Chi Zhao's effects is extremely good. So for that's the main reason I still play Chao Feng. Chao Feng also has another effect where if any of your cards are, well, whether if this card is destroyed by battle or card effect or sent to the graveyard, you can add any tuner. But once returned, if another of your monsters is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can summon a worm from your deck whose attribute matches the destroyed monsters. Again, we're literally playing worms with all 6 attributes, so you're always going to be able to summon something. So that's a nice little extra bit of board insurance for your turn. Yeah, this card overall I think is pretty good. Let's see, other kind of core cards to the extra deck. Of course, we've got the Draco Berserker of the Tenyi. This card is pretty good in general as a level 8 synchro, but is especially good in the Tenyi variant when you get locked into only making war monsters with Ashuna's effect. This is going to be one of your go-to level 8 synchros to make when that happens. So, excuse me, important to note that you can banish any monster that activates its effect, but it will not negate the effect. So do remember that. You can banish, but not negate. And then, of course, the Draco Berserker also has the often game-ending effect of being able to gain the attack of any effect monster that it battles, and then battle again. So, yeah, this, like I said, this card can often just end games. Very, very good card. Let's see here. Oh, of course, we've also got Yazi, Evil of the Yang Zing. We're playing a level 7 synchro because actually the Swordsoul spells, if you banish them, they can increase or decrease the level of one of your worms. So it's definitely possible to make the Yazi here. Also with, like, I don't know, if you really need to, something like Ash plus a level 4. But yep, Yazi can destroy one of each Yang Zing card on your field and a card your opponent controls. And then when this card is destroyed, you can summon any worms. So you'll often use those 2 effects in conjunction, popping the Yazi to pop an opponent's card, and then summon out any worm from your deck to keep comboing. Even without other outlying cards, you can already like just summon a Taia and banish the Yazi or whatever, you know, worm from your deck or from your graveyard, and then go into place from there. So that's pretty nice. As for the Link monsters, we've got 2 monks and a shaman. You do want 2 monks of the Tenyi. It comes up often enough during your combos where you'll use a Tenyi monster to make a monk, and then you'll end up needing to use it, make another monk to get another Tenyi in the graveyard to use its graveyard-based effect. You can also then link the 2 monks into a shaman, which can discard a card to revive a war monster in your graveyard. Just note that if you use this effect, you can't use the effects of any extra deck monsters except Tenyi monsters. So you can still summon non-Tenyi extra deck monsters, you just can't use their effects. So don't go into this or don't use this effect if you haven't made Chi Zhao yet, or honestly sometimes even Baron too, because having this Omni Negate is nice to counter hand traps, so do be mindful of that. However, that said, Shaman is an extremely good extender and can enable some kind of ridiculous plays if you're able to go into her. Okay, so I think that's like literally, wow, I'm already at 20 minutes, good lord. This is gonna be a long one. So yeah, that covers literally every single card in the deck and its function. Like I said, I've been practicing this build a lot. Of course, I'm still very open to suggestions. If you have any, do leave them in the comments below. I am very interested to hear them. Okay, now let's go ahead and watch some of these replays. Okay, first game we're going to take a look at here was actually also my first game with the deck on Ranked Ladder, so you'll get to see yeah, how the deck, or I guess rather how I come swinging just right out of the gate. We're playing against a 60-card Adamanticator deck. Always play against interesting stuff when you're here in Diamond 1. We look at our opening hand, it's actually pretty solid here. We're going to lead by specialing the Adhara. I'm then going to normal the Ecclesia and activate the effect. Not going into a Monk just yet because there's really no reason to, and we might be able to use the level 1 tuner. Of course, if we need to use, like, go into a Monk later to enable plays, that's fine too, but yep, we're going to go ahead and special the Mo Ye here. We're going to reveal the Longyuan in order to get our Swordsoul token. We can then sync the Mo Ye and the token into our Chi Zhao to start kicking off our combo line here. We'll use Chi Zhao's effect to go ahead, and of course Mo Ye's effect, and you also, this is another really like powerful aspect of the deck, you get to chain block the Chi Zhao's effect with Mo Ye, so even if your opponent's got the Ash, they can only hit the draw here, they can't actually hit the search. We draw another Longyuan, doesn't really, you know, do anything for us, but we'll go ahead and search the Emergence here. I'm going to use the Emergence to grab a Taia, because since we have the Sacred Summit, we can actually do some pretty cool combos here. I'm going to pitch a Taia in order to summon the Longyuan, get a token there, and then of course we can sync the Longyuan and the token now into good old Baron Defleur for some extra insurance, as well as, of course, more importantly, the Omni-Negate effect during our opponent's turn. Now we can use the Sacred Summon to bring back that Taia that we discarded and go ahead and activate its effect. We'll banish the Longyuan from our graveyard in order to summon a token. Now, here, let's actually see, I don't remember off the top of my head which Sheikra I went into. Okay, yeah, I went into Dragite here in order to negate spells or traps, although it was worth considering. Since I had the Adhara, I could have gone into a Baxia and then gone into Chao Feng. But it looks like we have other plans in mind here. I'm going to go ahead and use the Adhara to go into the Monk. Ah, that's right, I'm going to special summon the Vishuda for just a little bit of extra board presence here. I can then also use the Monk, or the Adhara, to wheel the Ashuna back into the hand here. Now I can go ahead and link the Monk and the Vishuda into a Shaman. Go ahead and use Shaman's effects, pitch the Ashuna, and I'll just go ahead and bring back Taia for potential use next turn. In case like the rest of my board gets answered, I can, you know, maybe next turn if Taia sticks around, go ahead and kick off my plays with that. So that's kind of one example of how you can use Shaman, but there are many, many, many different uses for this card. Because I have seen rather some people in other capacities ask, like on other, you know, videos, comments, stuff like, oh, what do you even need Shaman for? It's like, well, you don't need Shaman, but she's very nice to have. Alright, I don't really know what's with this called by for my opponent here. I guess maybe they aren't familiar with the deck, but yeah, they can go ahead and respond to my Chi Zhao with that. Maybe they were trying to bait a Baron negate or something. I don't know, but yeah, definitely going to use Chi Zhao to negate this Doki Doki after it uses its effect here. I do decide to negate the Xeno Guitar with the Baron, that way my opponent doesn't get to set up a block dragon here in the graveyard. I suspect they might not have been able to have enough Earths in order to use it, but obviously no reason to take the chance there. So opponent is going to go into Vert Anaconda, and then we know what this means, right? Yep, Fusion Destiny, and here comes the DPE. Definitely get used to seeing this line coming out. Opponent's actually going to go ahead and, you know, battle because they can battle over my Chi Zhao here. I'm going to Called By and banish the Celestial in order to force my opponent to use the DPE effect instead of getting, you know, getting to run over one of my monsters for free, and then battle over one of my monsters for free and then pop another. So funnily enough, you can't really actually, I guess if I'd flipped this to on, actually if I'd flipped this to on, I could have used Maxx during the draw phase, which would have been smart, but note that the effect to summon DPE activates when it's destroyed. Not during the standby phase when it's special summoned. You would think it activates during the standby phase, but no, it activates when it's destroyed, so you gotta be mindful of that. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and activate Taia's effect here. Basically, I want to goad my opponent to trying to use their DPE as soon as possible while investing as few resources as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and go into my Baxia here and spin back my opponent's cards, basically more or less forcing them to use the DPE at this point. And then we can even chain block the Baxia effect with Taia's effect. Yeah, opponent's gonna pop my Dragite, that's fine with me. I don't really particularly care about that, and then I'll put back the Vert Anaconda. And then, of course, they can go ahead and activate the effects, but I have more than enough resources really here in order to finish the game. Actually, my opponent was at 68, is that right? And then, yeah, of course, I had the Shaman to bring stuff back as well. So, yeah, like I said, that was the very first game we had on the Diamond 1 ranked ladder with this deck. Very nice. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next game. So this is an interesting deck we played against here. Another 60-card deck. This one was 60-card. It was like Eldritch, Zombie, and Tri-Brigade? And DPE engine, of course. So, yeah, I mean, you know, kudos to my opponent for doing something different. Can't ever really fault you for that, I suppose. We opened Ecclesia here, so we're going to lead by normally Ecclesia, and especially the Mo Ye once again, revealing the Longyuan? I actually have no idea how to pronounce that. I don't know, I always worry when I'm pronouncing, like, names in other languages that I'm not accidentally being really offensive with it, so hopefully that's not the case. But, yep, just like last time, we can go ahead and set up the chain block here to ensure we get the Cheese Out search. Again, the call by is nice. I'm going to get the Swordsoul Blackout here, because the Emergence really, I don't think is going to add many other plays, although I do want to note that when I made this play, I wasn't thinking about the fact that I could have added a Tenyi monster, so maybe if I had thought a little bit harder, I could have come up with a better line if I had added like an Ashuna or something, but you know, setting up the Baron and then setting 3 back row, like 3 disruptions, and having a Maxx is already a really powerful opening board. So, opponent's going to lead with the Eldritch's effect. I'm going to go ahead and banish the Eldritch with the call by. Naturally, my opponent's trying to goad the Baron negate here, but we actually happen to have the perfect counter already set, so we get to save the Baron negate. And, oh, I didn't realize the replay was going to be over that quickly. So, yeah, our opponent just kind of concedes in response to that. But that game is a good example of showing how, like, even a not as combo intensive hand still opens like a really, really powerful opening board, which again is, I think, one of Swordsoul's mainest. I really said mainest. I think it's one of Swordsoul's biggest and main appeals is to be able to do these combo lines with minimal investment, which it's kind of like the same reason Trizu is so good, right? Like your combos don't take much investment, so that way you can have a whole bunch of other disruption in your hand, and that way you can like have the end of your combo board and then also like 3 or 4 pieces of disruption on top of it. Kind of nuts, but okay, let's go ahead and look at the next game here. Alrighty, so this next game is going to be against Heroes, which I definitely respect that deck a great deal. It's actually my favorite deck of all time. I'm weeping because it's too expensive to really play in Master Duel. So this hand is okay. You know, it's not the best, but we can definitely work with it. We're going to start by using the Longyuan here. My opponent's got a Maxx, but fortunately I do have the Ash Blossom, so we've got some insurance against that. It's actually nice between Ash and Ash and Crossout and Called By. It's just nice to have all this protection against hand traps. So, while the token is still out, I'm going to want to go ahead and activate the Vessel of the Dragon Cycle in order to send the Ashuna and add the Adhara. Again, while we have a non-effect monster out, I need to go ahead and use the Ashuna effect here. I'll go ahead and get a Vishuda. I can then normal summon the Adhara, and actually, this was a bit of a misplay here. I definitely should have just gone into Baron first before making this Cheese Out. My opponent's got the Ash, and then they're also going to follow up with another hand trap, the Nibiru here. So, yeah, definitely, like I said, a misplay. I should have made the Baron before going into the Cheese Out. Although, to be fair, I probably would have gotten Nibiru anyway, because if my opponent had activated the Ash in response to the Cheese Out, I honestly probably would have just negated it with Baron. So, and then I would have gotten Nibiru. But, since we actually have a non-effect monster out, we can go ahead and use Adhara's effect to wheel the Ashuna back to our hand for potential plays next turn. You know, just a little bit scary, but at the very least I've got my own Nibiru, so there is that going for us at the very least. Opponent's got the Ferris here, which now makes me feel more safe, because I know with my Nibiru I can pretty easily deal with whatever heroes put out. And also, since they have only one other card in hand, I'm pretty confident I can set them up in a situation, well, I mean, they're going to get to some searches, of course, too, but I can set them up in a situation where I can really get them both in the Nibiru. Now, this is actually a game where, like, so, you know, normally here, there's the toggle to flip, you know, off, on, auto, all that fun stuff. Here, this is an example of a game where I flipped this to off as soon as I saw my opponent starting to combo out, because I want them to be like a little bit more confident in their combos. Now, I actually flipped it to on when I saw the Shadow Mist activating the effect, because I wanted to be able to Nibiru in response to the mask change, so that way they don't get the Dark Law out. But it's funny, so that concede looks really random for my opponent. But at this point, like I said, I had actually toggled my... This actually would have been a great live game for this exact example. But I then toggled, you know, my switch back from off to on. And then, of course, it's starting to prompt my activation for Nibiru at everything my opponent is doing. And I think my opponent could probably figure out by that point that what I had was a Nibiru, and realize that they weren't able to play through it, which is where the concede came from. That sounds like a relatively niche line to like really go through all the trouble of messing with that setting just to hide your Nibiru. Yes, and it's not even just me. Like, that's a very common practice up here, like in the upper ranks. So that can be a very useful tip for you guys if you want to goad your opponent into a false sense of security. You can, like I said, flip the off switch to hide the fact that you have Nibiru until well after their 5th summon. Just make sure you flip it back to on at a point where you want to, use or before the point where you actually want to use the Nibiru. Alrighty, we've got a couple more games. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next one. Alrighty, so this is actually going to be our first mirror match. I think this was the first mirror match I played, too. This is going to be against another Swordsoul Tenyi deck, but this deck is running 44 cards and including the DPE engine, which I have elected not to do. Now, I see a lot of people recommend running 42, 44, or even upwards of 48 cards in this deck. And I can't lie to you guys, it does not feel good to me. I really, really like my 40 card decks, so I don't know. I've seen enough people not only do it, but recommend it, that maybe I might be a bit more open-minded with this deck to try going up to 41 or 42, but like I said, I really like my 40 card decks. So, opponent's got the Gamma here. I'm actually going to go ahead and Belle the Gamma, because I really want this Cheese out to resolve. I just need to be able to synchro summon. I don't have to. I mean, I have an Ashen Nibiru, so I do have follow-up, but, yeah, like I said, I just really want to be able to make these plays here. So I'm going to go ahead and activate the Emergence, but my opponent's got the Ash, which really, really sucks. I was really trying to bait out this Gamma here. But it doesn't look like I'm going to get really the chance to do that. So I still do have a Cheese Out and a Blackout and, Ashes and then a Nibiru in hand. So, we're still looking pretty alright here. Opponent's going to summon Mo Ye and reveal Taia. I'm going to go ahead and use Cheese Out's effect to try to get the negate here. In hindsight, I definitely actually should have just Ashed here. Actually, no, could I have Ashed that? Now that I think about it. No, I don't think I could have. Never mind. Whoops. That's why I didn't do that. But yeah, no, we're definitely going to go ahead and negate for sure there. So that looked like a really weird thing my opponent did to run the Mo Ye into the Cheese Out. But in the mirror match, that's actually a really, really good play, because it's not hard at all for me. Now, it is hard for me with this hand because I actually... unfortunately, because I set the Blackout, which was still obviously the right call, but I don't have anything to discard for Longyuan, so I can't actually go into more plays. But in the mirror match, where it's really, really easy for me to banish stuff, it's actually a really, really good idea for my opponent to run the Mo Ye into the Cheese Out, so that way they guaranteed get it in the graveyard to set up the Taia that they revealed earlier. So very, very smart play on my opponent's part. I gotta give them kudos for that there real quick. So. Yep, like I said, I can't get the Longyuan into a level 10, which is really unfortunate, but I do still have other lines of play here. Or rather, I still have Disruption, so there is that at the very least. I'm going to go ahead and Ash this Emergence. Of course, my opponent's got the Gamma. I've known they've had the Gamma this whole time. I just need to go ahead and get them to use that at some point, so... I figured, I mean, obviously Ashing the Emergence is good either way, right? Whether we think the Ash is going to resolve or not. It's, like I said, the Gamma's got to happen at some point. So this deck can actually make pretty good use of Gamma in order to go into level 8 Synchros here. My opponent's going to go into a Draco Berserker. And then, of course, they're going to use the Mo Ye. I'm going to negate. They're going to try to banish with the Tenyi. And then, naturally, I'm going to flip the Blackout here to pop all the monsters on the board, since, my stuff's going to get stopped anyway. And yep, that's going to go ahead and negate the Mo Ye there. Or sorry, it's actually not going to negate the Mo Ye because my monster was on board to resolve the effect. So they do still get their token, but that's all they get. Now, we topped a call by, which is still not a Swordsoul or Worm card. Again, if I had any Swordsoul or Worm card, it's all I needed to make this Longyuan live, but I just couldn't get it, so... yeah, I couldn't call by in response to the Taia. Of course, my opponent's got far too many things to banish there, so... now here they go into the Yazi. They did the level adjustment, like I mentioned in the actual deck profile, by by banishing the Emergence. Again, if you banish either of these Swordsoul spells, you get to adjust the level of a worm. So, yep, the Yazi popped my back row. I'm going to go ahead and flip the call by. Obviously, since it's going to get popped, I'll go ahead and banish their Ashuna to prevent at least some amount of comboing on my opponent's part. But they still get to summon a worm, a Mo Ye, which means they get to go into their Chizao. And between the Mo Ye and the Chizao now, unfortunately, they've got plenty of combo lines. And as you can see, the chain blocking helping my opponent here because I've got the well, I guess I already ashed, so never mind, I couldn't do that. But yeah, opponent's gonna go ahead and use the oh no, sorry, that was a different turn. That's right. So I was accurate there. I couldn't block the surge there. I am gonna try to ash the Emergence, but then my opponent's got a called by here, so. This is actually a good example, though, of why it's important to have, like, why I'm playing call-bys and crossouts, or why you might want to play call-bys and gamma, because, you know, your combos being disrupted, right, really bites. I mean, obviously that's true for any combo, but with this deck, if you can at least get the Chizao out, like, you can, you know, you can chain block to extend your plays and have a negation up, even if your opponent can stop in that scenario, so... we do get the Nibiru here, but our opponent does get to draw 2 cards off of Maxx, which is definitely not ideal. And then they get to continue their main phase too, and their draws let them go into a live level 10 play. So, yeah, again, it's just if I had drawn any Worm or Swordsoul card for this Longyuan here, this game would have played out so differently. But, you know, coulda, woulda, shoulda. It is what it is. Yeah, opponent gets to go into Baron, pop my Nibiru, and then they get to wheel the Ashuna back to their hands as they control the Nibiru token. And actually use the Ashuna effect because they haven't used it yet, but I had the called by to negate it, so my opponent doesn't actually get to summon something. But okay, we did finally draw the Adhara. We finally drew the card to make our Longyuan live, but of course that is too little too late at this point. I wonder if actually I should have... Well, I guess if I had... Because I'm just trying to... I'm thinking out loud, right? Like if I had summoned Adhara, send it for the Monk, right? And then could I have used Adhara's effect? But then that would have gotten negated by Baron. I still would have had a dead Longyuan in hand. So I don't think that actually would have done anything different. So, yep, we did lose the mirror match there. But hey, at least it was the mirror match. At least it was a pretty solid back and forth there. All right, we've got one more game to watch. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. Alrighty, this last game is going to be against regular old 40 card Emancipator. Not a 60 card variant this time. I don't remember, actually, I just looked at the deck, but I just briefly glanced at it, so I didn't see if they're playing DPE. I feel like maybe they do pull out a DPE in this build, but I think if you're playing a standard 40-card Emancipator, I don't know, I kind of suspect you don't really have room for the DPE engine. I could very well be wrong about that, and maybe it's just so optimal that it's worth putting more bricks in your deck, but that's the thing, right? It's like, it's just, I don't know, it's a hard sell for me to want to put more bricks for my excavates, but maybe the engine is just good enough to do that. In any case, here we're going to start off once again with like that first game there by specialing Adhara, and then going into a pretty typical Mo Ye line. Searching the Sacred Summit with the Chizao here, because we already have the Taia and the Longyuan. Normally you would want to get Emergence, but with specifically this hand, I want to get Sacred Summit in order to more or less enable myself to go into an extra Synchro monster. So we're going to go into the Baron here, and then we're going to Sacred Summit, get back the Taia. Now in this game, I do actually do that alternative line to the Dragite that I mentioned earlier, where instead you go for a Baxia. Since we have the Adhara, we can use the Baxia and the Adhara to then go into Chow Fang. And yeah, the reason I did it turn 1 this time, but not last time, is because, you know, actually, before the last couple of games, I run into a fair amount of, well, not a fair amount, but I ran into that last mirror match, and then another mirror match that I actually misplayed really hard against. So it's kind of embarrassing why I'm not showing that game. But, yeah, so this time, you know, after facing a couple of mirror matches, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go for a Chow Fang instead of a Dragite here. And we also get to set up a Vishuda in the grave as well. We'll throw out an extra Monk of the Tenyi, because, you know, why not? And then, well, also not why not, but we get to use the Adhara to wheel the Ashuna back to our hand for potential future plays, either by itself with its own effect, or with this Longyuan in our hand. So, yeah, then our opponent reveals the Analyzer, and it's like, well, of course, now I'm playing against, like, the one deck that Chao Feng's, you know, light effect monster creation really does absolutely nothing against, because most decks you can hit at least one monster, but, nope, not really with that Emancipator. So, I'm going to go ahead and negate the Analyzer search here. My opponent's then going to immediately go into Riptide. I suspect they're not using the effects here because they don't want to get Baroned. They just want to set up their own Baron instead, which, you know, definitely a respectable thing to want on my opponent's part. So this is kind of smart here. They're going to activate the Destruction effect here to try to goad me into using my Baron, and then they can negate my Baron with theirs, but they targeted the Chi Zhao instead of my Baron for some reason. Like, if they had targeted my Baron, then I really couldn't have done anything, because either one, I let it resolve, my Baron gets destroyed, or two, I use my Baron's Omni Negate effect, so they use their Baron's Omni Negate effect. But see, I don't know. I was gonna say I think they were trying to save the Omni Negate, but then they just ran my Baron into, or their Baron into mine. So yeah, I don't really know what my opponent's end goal was there, but whatever. Since we have the Chao Feng out, we do, even though we don't get to negate anything with it, we get to summon a Taia out of the deck since we lost a wind monster. So that at least is pretty nice. Doesn't look like our opponent's got really any other plays. We're just going to have to pass it back to us. I'm going to go ahead and lead with the Longyuan effect. Or Longyuan. Again, I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm going to send the Ashuna and then get the token, but that's not really going to matter at that point, because now my opponent goes ahead and gives us the concede. So, yep, that is the games I've got to show you so far. Let's go ahead and move right on to the outro. Alright guys, so there it is. Those are those games with my new Tenyi Swordsoul deck. Oh, I'm so looking forward to playing even more games with this deck. Like, I expect to see a lot of live gameplay videos, and just gameplay videos in general. Not just with this deck, but I'm also going to be doing another Swordsoul deck profile. I don't know if I'm going to do it right after this one. I think I might space them apart a little bit, but we're going to look at the pure variant of Swordsouls too. See how that differs, see how it plays different. But although I will say now between the two, I personally like the Tenyi variant a little bit better. And even with the Tenyi variant, you can also be running Crystron, Halki Fibrax, and Auroradon with a Despot 001 to enable even more plays. But I might try that variant out. I know that's the variant that typically goes above 40 cards though, and again, like I said, I love my 40 card decks, so maybe we'll see. If that actually ends up being just the clear better variant, of course I'll go ahead and move into it, but I really like this particular build right now. Like I said earlier though, do let me know in the comments your feedback, if you have anything you would change, anything you would suggest, anything that would enable like better lines of play. I'm always open to the feedback, and you guys give such good constructive criticism in your comments. I've said it multiple times before, and I'll keep saying it till the ends of the earth. I have one of the better comment sections I've ever seen on YouTube. I really do. I feel like I got really lucky by having you guys. You guys are awesome. So thank you as always for watching, especially the very end of the video like this. And if you're commenting and subscribing, thank you for doing that as well. But you know, as long as you're here along for the ride with me, that is more than enough. So yeah, that is going to do it for today's video. Without further ado, this is Xlex signing out, and I hope you have a fantastic day.